at lovedreamingbeach.com.
Welcome to bad lighting. Yeah. Well, I'm making some vegan tofu baby bok choy ramen soup as usual. And I thought I would just pop on and do a recorded video talking about my current thoughts about Lindsey Clancy. I am still watching the case, the trial. So the prosecution rested their case in chief, and the defense started theirs. They called some witnesses today. Honestly, I'm not going to get into a whole long thing because I genuinely believe she's probably going to get a hung jury. I have a ton of stuff on here because I've got to go through all my old Tupperware. So that's what that is behind me, if you can see that. I just find it really sad. I find the whole situation sad, mostly for the children and for the ex-husband, because they didn't deserve to have their lives stolen in such a horrible, violent manner. And I believe that she should be held legally responsible, because I believe that a lot of things point to her actually being aware of what she was doing. Dry a little bit more. I just feel that she was methodical, and she wrote, let me see if I can do better lighting. Is that better? Not really. She was methodical. She took notes. She seemed to be writing a narrative. The note that she updated the night before she did what she did was just too blog posty, and it certainly didn't seem to be the writing of somebody who was incoherent and in psychosis. And I just don't believe that you go into psychosis, but just for the exact amount of time, this one's not even clean, that it takes you to do the crime. Okay, I guess I'm gonna have to wash this one. Back up. You know, so just the exact amount of time that it took her, you know, before she did what she did, she was perfectly fine on the phone talking to CBS. She was perfectly fine on the phone making the order. She was perfectly fine in text messages, planning it out with Patrick. Then he leaves. She takes off her Apple Watch almost right away. Her phone was recording her going upstairs, up or downstairs or something. And she methodically does what she does to them. And then she misses a call from Patrick, either in the middle or, you know, at some point in it. She calls him back right away. They talk for 14 seconds. He said she sounded like she was in the middle of something, but she seemed fine enough. Then I think he called back another time and she missed that call. And a lot of people who want to believe that he did it, or he framed her, or somehow he was culpable, somehow it was his fault. You know, there are people who just can't accept that a relatively pretty, somewhat wealthy white woman could be pure evil. Maybe she wasn't pure evil. You know, a lot of people say, oh, she was such a great mother. Was she, or was she just putting on an act? Some people want to be perceived as great mothers, and so when they're in front of people, they put on an act, but behind closed doors, they're really not so great. We all have our issues. No one is perfect. I've had my struggles parenting, being a single mom with 2 kids and doing 99% of all of it on my own. And it's very stressful. And some, you know, yes, when they were babies, it was sleep deprivation was just part of it. And I didn't have the support system. My brother's wife's parents are incredibly active grandparents, and my brother and his wife can leave their 3 sons with her parents for an entire week if they want to, if they need to. And she started leaving her kids for overnights since the babies were babies. My sister-in-law, damn, I need more broth. My sister-in-law, she's a millennial. She's a modern woman. She's 44. Hold on. I'm still trying to get my kitchen situated. Everything is, most stuff is still not packed. Ugh. Ow! Fuck. I don't know where anything is. But, my sister-in-law had, you know, on my side, my mom is a very busy woman, and she has a full-time job, and she's just not available to babysit as much. I will be honest, she babysat my brother's kids a hell of a lot more than she ever babysat mine. But he's her baby, and he's spoiled. My baby brother is spoiled. My baby brother, who's a grown man and a father of 3. But my point is that seeing how my sister-in-law, my brother and my sister-in-law, they go on vacations a lot, sometimes without the kids, sometimes a lot of times with the kids, but they have a network, a village around them of people who are helping them with their children. It doesn't mean that it's easy. It doesn't mean that my sister-in-law doesn't have struggles. You know, I did not have such a big support system. My baby's daddy, my baby's daddy's parents, they were super helpful when they lived in the same town. But when my babies were still babies, they moved an hour away. And it just made it quite difficult. So what ended up happening was, because me and my kid's dad, we consciously uncoupled in 2014, 12 years ago. And because of that, Well, they moved down. They moved down an hour away, and he now he lives with his mother. His father died 3 years ago. But so, you know, when they were in town, I could bring my kids to their house. Like once a week. Once a week I would drop them off for 3 to 4 hours. I'd go to therapy, I'd go food shopping. I'd go home, I'd bring the groceries in. Maybe I would take a shower, you know. It's not like I was going and doing night out on the town. I was like getting some important stuff done. Taking care of my mental health. And very thanks to her, thanks to his mom, I was able to do that. But then, when they moved an hour away, that just wasn't accessible to me anymore. And my mom wasn't available. And my sister wasn't available. My sister was working. And my brother had his own babies. And then I ended up babysitting my brother's 3 kids for like 3 years. Because I was a stay-at-home mom. I was a single mom. I needed a way to earn money while I was home with my kids. And I barely got paid anything. But that's how I survived for those years. And anyway, my point, I was talking about Lindsey Clancy. And listen, I understand that different people have different levels of mental illness. And I understand that different levels of mental illness, regardless of your support, will impact people differently. And I'm not saying that I could never see a situation where someone was failed by the system or crying out for help and nobody was listening, and that I would say this person, this woman, this person did everything they possibly could to get help. And they had no resources. They had no support system. They had no help. And she went utterly crazy. But this is a woman who had a nanny 3 times a week, sometimes more. She had her husband who worked from home. She had her mother who was willing to come and stay with her a lot, even from like, and she herself had suggested, can you come from, let's say, Friday to Tuesday? Mom said yes. She had in-laws who would be willing to have the kids at their house or to take them on day trips. But Lindsay said it's better if they're home with their own stuff, which, hey, I agree. When my mother-in-law would offer, her offer included, I have to get them ready, pack their bag, get their food, pump their milk, do whatever, so I could bring them to her house. But she also had stuff for them. She had books for them and little clothes for them, and she had a playpen for them. And her place was safe. And she was very loving and attentive, and she absolutely adored being with them. Plus, she was already, let's see, she was like in her 70s. And her husband, who he's passed away now, their grandpa, he had MS, and he was in a wheelchair. And he wanted to be with the grandkids. She wanted to have them at her house because that way her and her husband could watch them together. And she could bond with them along with their grandpa. And that, you know, and it just made sense to me. It would have been easier for me. It would have been more helpful help if she would come to my place. And, you know, once in a long while she would do that. But for the most part, it was what she could offer, and she lived in town. And so that's what I did. And then when she no longer lived in town, because it was way too expensive here and they couldn't afford it anymore, that they were in their 70s and mostly retired. And so they moved an hour away where they could afford it. And unfortunately, my 3-4 hour break once a week was gone. And, but then me and their dad ended up consciously uncoupling and separating. And so she would still end up helping like once a week, but it would always be when the kids were with him, her son, their dad. And now their grandpa has passed away. Their dad, my ex, lives full time with her. And every time that they go sleep over with him, it's at her house because he lives with her. And so they get to see her every week. But anyway, my mom still works full time. My sister works full time. My brother works full time. His wife works full time. So I don't have a very huge support system, to be honest. It's mostly me. When I have the kids, which is 95% of the time, I'm the one taking care of them and doing everything. Anyway, my point is that I was just sharing a little bit about my personal life, but honestly, I do believe that there are situations where it just would be obvious that somebody was crying out for help, they had no access to help, or they had no help network, and their mental health was truly out of control, and they did something horrific. But I think in this case that she was way too aware of right and wrong, of the fact that what she was doing was a crime. And she planned it. It's obvious she planned it. She premeditated it. I believe that she had a whole narrative about it. And I think that she should go to prison for life. But I also think she's probably going to get a hung jury and another trial.
GetLoveDreamingBeach.com